6 months after his inauguration, when President Trump pledged that he would end the war in Ukraine within 24 hours, now he's been forced to adopt a very different approach towards Russia. One that, at least on paper, seems to be remarkably close to that of his predecessor, Joe Biden. And that is to arm the Ukrainians to fight off the Russian invasion. On Monday this week, Trump announced the U.S. decision to send more than a dozen Patriot missile batteries to Ukraine in the presence of the visiting NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. For President Trump, the decision to sell arms to Ukraine, although he did say that Europe will foot the bill, marks a complete reversal in his Ukraine and Russia policy. Not just that, he even threatened Russia with deep sanctions on energy exports in the next 50 days if it does not negotiate a ceasefire. But the question is, will Putin listen? Will Putin play ball with Trump?
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is.
Even in his statement of support for Ukraine as he sat in the Oval Office along with Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, President Trump made it clear that he planned to keep his distance from direct involvement in this war. Instead, he blamed the Democrats for this war. He called it Obama and Biden's war.
I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look, he's, I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy. It's been proven over the years. He's fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me.
But Trump's belligerence hides a plain feeling of betrayal that he feels at the hands of Putin. Even if he did not use the words, the tone was a dead giveaway. That Trump felt deceived by President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Trump was hoping there would be a quick resolution. He was hoping on the calculation that Putin wanted a quick end to this war, and he was willing to do so if he got an ending on his own terms. But Putin had other ideas, and this is where Trump grossly miscalculated. The Russian summer offensive has been largely going in Putin's favorable way. Russia now is firmly in control of most of eastern and southern Ukraine, and now he's pressing the advantage on the battlefield. Putin wants more. He wants more Ukrainian territory. During last year's presidential campaign, then candidate Trump, who went on to become president for a second term, he had vowed a quick resolution to the Ukraine war. And his argument on the campaign trail was that Trump alone had the stature to deal with the Russian leader. Once he took office, he blamed the Ukrainians for Russia's invasion of their own country. He then had an infamous clash with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. It was an extraordinary showdown that happened in the Oval Office back in February.
You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers.
But Trump even gave Russia a free pass on tariffs. He praised Putin for his strength, and he provided assurance that Ukraine would never join NATO. Until this week, when for the very first time, Trump threatened 100% tariffs on Russia if it doesn't agree to a quick ceasefire. But the threat of weapons and 3 years of fighting, this battle of attrition against American weapons, against a combined strength of NATO, none of that has deterred Putin so far. So it's highly unlikely that the threat of Trump tariffs is going to make him stop the war. But that's not stopping Trump either. Trump talked approvingly of a bipartisan Senate bill that would allow the US president to impose up to 500% tariffs on any country that purchases Russian oil or gas. But Trump stopped short of endorsing that bill. The bill is clearly aimed at both China and India, and there is good reason to wonder whether Trump, who's already engaged in bitter tariff negotiations with both of these countries, will actually carry through with this threat.
It's a horrible war, and it should be stopped. And so if it's not done, if we don't have an agreement in 50 days, that's what we're doing, secondary tariffs. And they're biting, and I hope we don't get to the point where we do.
Last week, Trump complained for the very first time that Putin had strung him along. And then Trump lifted a brief pause on America delivering weapons to Ukraine. But it's only over the last few days that he formally endorsed the NATO and European plan which was presented to him by Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General. The plan essentially is to arm the Ukrainians by shipping American-made weapons to Ukraine in its time of need, and then subsequently, America would help by backfilling the Europeans by selling them new arms.
So I've been in contact with many countries. I can tell you that at this moment, Germany massively, but also Finland and Denmark and Sweden and Norway, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Canada, they all want to be part of this, and this is only the first wave. There will be more. So what we will do is work through the NATO systems to make sure that we know what Ukrainians need, so that we can make packages. Of course, in a way, we discussed it this morning with Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, in a way that, of course, the US will keep on its stockpiles necessary to defend this country. That's absolutely clear. But it will mean that Ukraine can get its hands on really massive numbers of military equipment, both for air defense, but also missiles, ammunition, etc., etc.
The Russians also seem to doubt whether President Trump would stick to his position for too long. The Moscow Stock Exchange dumped 2.5% after Trump's announcement. It was perhaps reflective also of the relief that sanctions were not going to be immediately imposed. The reading in Moscow seems to be that if this is all that Trump has to say about Ukraine, then for now at least, the threat of a full-blown war between America and Russia has receded. Trump, though, could change his mind anytime between now and early September when that 50-day deadline runs out. Trump has repeatedly changed his tariff deadlines for various countries. There is no reason why he won't do the same with Russia. Trump has never really had much use for the NATO alliance or the order, the global order that it has created for the last 80 years. Nor has he ever in the past decade condemned Putin with the same level of ferocity that Biden did. Trump, in fact, has never called the 2022 Russian invasion illegal. He, in fact, praised Putin for a smart, if violent, land grab. He has also approached the sporadic negotiations over a ceasefire and a possible peace deal as a real estate transaction, the one in which he has envisioned that Putin will basically hold on to whatever land he controls now in the south and the east of Ukraine. But Putin does not view this as a real estate transaction. He wants more. He doesn't view this war as a war over territory. For Putin, this is about Russia re-establishing its primacy in the existing global order. This is about extending the Russian motherland, as it were, into some kind of a Pax Russiana, which used to exist in the 16th and 17th centuries. And Putin is not going to stop just yet. But for now, President Trump seems to be acting out of a sense of personal vindictiveness and perhaps the realization that his relationship with Putin is not what he imagined it to be. Trump has spoken with Putin 5 times since taking office, although the results have been diminishing. Trump sent his special envoy Steve Witkoff to visit the Kremlin, but he returned empty-handed. Trump has said that there would be no progress on Ukraine until there is a direct meeting between him and Putin. No such meeting has been scheduled in the almost 6 months of the second Trump term. And given the events of the last few days, it looks even more unlikely now.